Hi, welcome to Creative Conversations for LCI Melbourne. Today we're here at the Australian headquarters for Hugo Boss, and we're going to learn everything about the Managing Director, Matthew Keighran. Hi Matthew Keighran, how are you going?
Hi Michael, welcome to Hugo Boss Australia.
Hi Matthew, how are you going?
Hi, how you doing?
Yeah, I'm good. Look, thank you for having us today at your pretty much brand new offices in Keighran. It must be pretty exciting to get into a new building like this just after, I guess, what's been a pretty tough couple of years in lockdown.
Yeah, I mean, it's been incredibly exciting. We had it up and ready to go just before the last lockdown in Melbourne in winter, and I was getting really excited about having everybody back. This is not just the headquarters for Australia, but also for my region, for CPAC. So we're having a lot of people move from other parts of Asia here. So it was something that I was really looking forward to, and I'm sure the team were. But fortunately, that wasn't the case. I was coming here quietly by myself during the lockdowns just to get in the right space. But it's really amazing office, and it's a really great location too.
Oh yeah, I mean Keighran's kind of like in Melbourne. It's become one of the creative hubs for where all sort of like the startups and really interesting things, and for fashion. I know that it's a really important place for becoming sort of the headquarters for a lot of businesses. So you are the managing director for Hugo Boss for CPAC. What does CPAC actually mean?
So it stands for, it's not easy. Once upon a time, they used the word APAC, which is Asia Pacific, but we split that into two. So we have one hub called Greater China, which is China, Hong Kong, Taiwan, and then the rest, which is my region, which really stands for South and East Asia Pacific. So from the markets of Japan, Korea, so all the markets of Southeast Asia, Vietnam, Singapore, Malaysia, Thailand, to Australia and New Zealand. So it's pretty geographically diverse, culturally diverse, economically, climate's different, you got reverse season, so it can be quite challenging at times, but it's a very, very interesting market to be part of.
Yeah, no kidding. From the perspective of being a managing director, that is a big role. How long have you been with Hugo Boss?
This time I've been with him it'll be 11 years this coming September. And I started back here. So this, by the way, is the second time I've worked for Hugo Boss. So I started working for them in 1998 in their Japanese subsidiary. And I worked there, and then I moved out here when we started our own subsidiary. That's exactly 20 years ago, which is in Melbourne. At the time, the office was in Preston. And this time I've been back since 2011. So started as the managing director for Australia, and they kept giving me bits and bobs. And Japan is a market that I know really well, and I speak Japanese. So I suppose that made sense at some point to get me involved. It's certainly a market that we could do a lot more with. So that's been very exciting. So in this role, it's been since 2017.
Yeah. So mentioning Japan, I know that you lived there quite a long time. How long did you live in Japan for?
I've lived in Japan all up probably a quarter of my life, so somewhere around the 12, 13, 14 years on and off. I've lived there 5 times, and in this role I was sort of supposed to be going backwards and forwards, being that's the biggest market. Outside, Australia and Japan are relatively quite big in size, but of course with COVID that all stopped. But it's been a really, an integral part of my life and my career. I first went there when I was 16 as an exchange student, studied for a year in high school, and that really sort of changed the course of my life. I went back there, went Japanese, and then I started working for Hugo Boss there after I'd finished university, and sort of, it was the foundations for my career. And it's funny how it's come back many, many times. I worked for Ralph Lauren, they sent me there. It was a sort of big market for them, Japan.
Yeah.
And then, with Boss, I kind of started to overlook the market in 2017. So, it's been integral, and it's a very important part of, I suppose, who I am. And fashion's such a such a an amazing thing in Japan. Fashion, retail, the art scene, the creativity is something that's always inspired me.
Yeah, I always see, and I think from across the board, from arts, music, film, food, design, everything. I think Japan is something which inspires so many designers and so many artists, and I think there's something about it being such a dynamic culture of creativity that's come out of, definitely from the mid last century, where we're sort of coming out of a big moment of change into this explosion of almost like creative freedom, which brought about a lot of that. And I think that's probably why I know many artists who live over there and have made it their it's like their half hub. They've got Australia and then they've got Japan.
And that was sort of what it was kind of my perfect existence. I have an apartment in Tokyo, but I haven't been there now for 2 years.
No.
And it's really, it's a place that's really special to me, and it's hard to explain, but I'm really glad that the world is interested in Japan, because probably up till sort of 5, 6, 7 years ago, it was all sort of a bit too hard basket. So I thought it was too expensive, the language was difficult, the culture was difficult, but it's the culture that makes it really, really special. And if anyone, if you're into fashion and all the art, design, it's a place that is really inspiring.
Yeah. So have you always had a career in fashion, and did that start with studying fashion early on?
Yeah, I studied fashion at RMIT. So that was almost 30 years ago I graduated. At the time, it was a very different course. It was quite broad. I think these days they stream it more into sort of the merchandising, marketing side, and then there's more the design side. But in those days, it was everything, and that was good actually, because it sort of rounded you. Gave you quite a broad perspective. That also allowed me to go into the areas of business. I never ended up being a designer, but I think my strength was always that I had a good eye, buying, marketing. I suppose delivering it to the end consumer was what was always interesting to me, and that's sort of where I ended up. But I started with Hugo Boss in Japan as a visual merchandiser. I saw an ad in the paper and I just thought, just get my foot in the door. And at that time, Hugo Boss wasn't a big brand in Japan, not like the Louis Vuittons or the Gucci's of the world. So that was a really interesting experience. I was the only non-Japanese in the office, dealing with a German headquarters. So it was a really, really interesting experience, and here I am now.
Yeah, I feel like there's a strong affinity between visual merchandisers and business and art at the same time. It's like you're a business-minded installation artist, and you've got to be able to think on your feet. For all the visual merchandisers I know, including my wife, that's what it takes. It takes a special skill set to be able to see that. But you also have an understanding about presenting something for a very commercial reason. You're presenting it in the best light in order to be able to sell it. And I can see how that kind of feeds into the business side. Was that part of your studies? Was it business marketing, or is that something that you've just naturally been able to do?
In those days, we were able to sort of do much more in the way of the business study, merchandising, buying, and planning, which is probably where most of the jobs are in the Australian fashion industry. So it was quite well rounded, and I think to be a good managing director or a retail director or sales, you need to have a good grasp on all of those customer-facing aspects. So the product, I always talk the 5 Ps. The product, first of all, is it the right product? Is it the right product in the right space? Because each store, even within Melbourne, is quite different in terms of its demographic. Then you've got the presentation. So how does it look? Is it enticing? Is it easy to shop? Is it commercially viable? But visual merchandising is, it's a tool that I think is the best of both worlds. We say where art and science meets in the middle is where there's a good business.
Yeah.
You want to push the customers, inspire the customers, and then there's also a point where you don't want to frighten them off either, and you don't want it to be boring. So you've got to always find that really sort of that solid ground, and that's where successful businesses are. With the rest of the piece, it's the people. So good teams, good training, good customer focusing. Staff, CRM, then you've got promotion or the marketing of it, and the back end is the processes. So if you get those 5 right, your retail business is generally in good shape.
Yeah, absolutely. So we sort of jumped ahead to Japan there, but let's go back just quickly to when you were finishing your degree at RMIT. What was it like leaving RMIT? Was it competitive, and was it hard to find a job straight out of the gates?
Yeah, well, at the time, the world was in a very, very severe recession, particularly Victoria, actually, or in Australia. That was the last big recession that we had. In fact, in those days, they condensed a 4-year course into 3 because a lot of the practical aspects, we used to be, go and work in a company, that all shut down because, the rag trade was in also a world of pain. So it wasn't an easy time to leave, but it was also a time of great creativity. We had the Fashion Design Council, used to be on Collins Street. We had the emergence of some of those big Australian brands. Some of them still exist, but just to get your foot in the door. This is where I always get the generational difference. It was just like, whatever you want me to do, take out the boxes, sweep the floor. Yeah, I'm here for you. Just give me a chance, and you have to. And I would say even today, those people that are willing to go above and beyond or out of their perhaps job descriptions are always going to be the ones that leap ahead.
Yeah.
They always will. But in those days, we didn't have a choice. You had to do it.
Yeah. That's actually been a common theme which seems to reoccur with lots of people. And it's actually come up in a couple of the previous in the series of these discussions we've had, where designers have said, when I first started my job, I was happy just to jump in and do anything, and also learn skills which were outside of my skill set and understand what other people in the organisation do. Because I think at the end of the day, if you want to be successful in your job, understanding what other people do because you've done it gives you insight into how the whole organisation works.
That's right.
And how everyone works as part of a really well-tuned system.
Yeah, it's like a machine, and the more we can understand how, your position interacts with the rest, the better it is. Yeah, getting rid of silos in a company is always one of the hardest things to do. And that takes a lot of work, and that's management's job. Well, we don't like to say management, it's leader's job.
Yeah.
Try not to use the word management too much these days.
Yeah, no, I completely agree with that. So let's look at Hugo Boss. When you first came back to Hugo Boss, I guess after being away in that middle section there, what did you come back? What was your goal when you came back into this role?
Well, I could see that there was still a lot of potential in the market in Australia. We have a well-established brand and have for quite some time, but there were a lot of opportunities. E-commerce at the time was starting up. It's taken a while to get that off the ground, but Australia has always had a very strong e-commerce business. It took a while to get our version of it off the ground. There were a lot of things, I think, at the time that was still, we were trying to take the business into retail rather than wholesale franchising. So there was a lot of takeovers, a lot of understanding and putting into place, retail trainings, procedures, recruitment. So that was a really interesting time, because we were changing from a wholesale company into what is primarily retail, and that's whether that's be in stores, in department stores, with concession stores, or in outlets. So that was really interesting to me, because my previous job at Ralph Lauren for the previous 2 years was in Japan, running retail across all of those channels, and that was a huge business. With like 420 locations, and I learned a lot at that company. I think coming back to this company, I was in the role of managing director, which I hadn't done before. And there were a lot of things that I wanted to bring to that role, where I'd learnt from some really good leaders and managers, and then there were some managers who I definitely learnt how not to behave or treat. So equally, you learn from the good and the bad, and bringing people together in a cohesive form with the one focus is the constant focus for managing director or leaders. you've got to, obviously it's like having marbles on a table. You kind of got to have to keep doing that. You got to keep moving people, because invariably people do go off and focus on what they want to do. So having the same KPIs, the same goals, you just sort of have to kind of keep repeating yourself. The simpler the message, the better. But ultimately, I think we mentioned before, it's like a machine. Everybody needs to know how they sit together, how they work together and function to make the car go forward. And that is a challenge. But leading people is one of the great joys of the job. But people invariably take up the people aspect of working takes up probably 80% of your time too.
Yeah. So picking the right goal to start with as that 20% of the strategic planning for a business, and then working out how to put that in
and
place
get the right
to get
people.
To get the team and then to get them working in that cascading, this is what we're doing, is a really important thing. But it's also important to keep them inspired so they enjoy their jobs, right?
That's right. And you want the work. It can't be all. It can't be all about the grind. We say 20% of the time you might have to work more than you usually do, but there has to be fun and there has to be passion in what you're doing. Sometimes I think, in the fashion industry, internally we forget that. Externally it looks quite glamorous.
Yeah.
But if we look around and say, like, what a great brand, the most amazing product, great stores, we should be constantly inspired by that. I mean, I have to be honest, the last couple of years has been incredibly challenging, trying to bring people on board, trying to keep myself inspired, because a leader does that. It brings people on a journey, and if you can't sort of get yourself out there, it's so remote. I was so used to traveling. I'd been on a plane every single week for probably the last 4 years, and then couldn't go outside 5 kilometers of my zone. That was challenging.
Yeah.
And you've got to find your way around things, but I'm not going to deny it wasn't hard. Sometimes it's a bit lonely at the top.
Yeah. I can imagine that, and trying to be the that motivational glue that sort of keeps everyone together, and everyone gets out of bed in the morning. And during lockdown, we probably all got out of bed in the morning going, all right, here we go again. But from a leadership perspective, you've got to get out of bed in the morning, and then you've got to be on, right? So, and that's got to be a challenge. You talked about sort of that whole idea of inspiration, though, is pretty interesting. You, as Hugo Boss is going through an enormous transformation at the moment, you've just rebranded, and that must be, it must be challenged, but it also must be really exciting to see what opportunities are opening up. For any brand, that word rebrand is probably sort of like half exciting, half super scary. Can you tell us a little bit about that? What are the challenges and what are the really exciting things that have come out of it?
Well, change in any circumstance is always interesting, right? About half the people are really up for it and half the people really are against it. So bringing people on that journey is difficult, but what we've done as a company is change the logos, is totally separate our two brands. One is Boss, one is Hugo. They're aiming now clearly at different audiences. But to change the logo in itself is a huge enterprise. I mean, it's on everything from a business card to a hanger to a tag to the fronts of the stores, and so all of that has to happen over in the next probably 12 to 18 months. But the company under new leadership now in our headquarters in Germany are really focused on bringing our brand into a new era, focusing on a new generation, and it's incredibly exciting. But we really have to change the way we do things. We're much more. We need to be flexible and open to the changes. I think I mentioned before, marketing from where it was 10 years ago, and I started in Australia years ago with Boss as the head of marketing. So it used to be put a couple of magazines, do a couple of outdoors, a bit of an event, get your product on the right people. Now all that's gone. It's pretty much a digital landscape, whether it's coming from influencers or digital platforms. it's a whole new ball game, and we've just got to be on board with that and make some pretty swift changes. It's not easy for the print media, but of course they've had to make a lot of changes in the last few years too. Where people are getting their inspiration from these days is totally different to where it was even like 5 years ago. So that's been hugely exciting, but I think it's also been challenging for some of the team.
Yeah, look, I know that the digital landscape is enormous now. I mean, like any business, if they're not an omni-channel business now, where you're working in retail spaces, concessions,
online,
particularly, and if you're not online, you're nowhere. I feel like that competitive realm, especially for satisfying your audience online when they can be hypercritical, all the way through every single level of when they first find you, whether you capture their attention, how do you satisfy them along the way, and how do you make them, I guess, loyal and really be in love with your company. There's so many ways to be able to do that in the digital realm now. And I think that, I think from what I can see with you is that one of your main audiences now is really that younger audience, and maybe not so much in the past. I always think about when, maybe 10, 15 years ago, I always thought Hugo Boss, absolutely beautiful suits, beautiful watches, shirts. And now looking around the offices and seeing what I see in retail out there is that you've got a really interesting, really vibrant range which addresses youth anywhere from sort of maybe 16 all the way up to probably 60. Into 60s, yeah. So tell us about that. That must be exciting for your designers.
Yeah, and I think we've always had a fairly broad perspective on our design. We could say you could dress the kid, the dad, the granddad, but it's about getting those people in. Sometimes the younger generation doesn't always see or want to be sort of part of perhaps what their dad or older brother's doing. So that's been really, really interesting. I mean, in the last 5 years, we've definitely shifted strongly, not totally, because tailoring is our heritage, and it's something that we pretty much own, particularly in a market like Australia. There's no one that comes near us in terms of quality or price, the quality price. So we don't want to give that away, but we should be the go-to brand, not just for menswear, by the way. We also have women's wear, which does quite well in Australia. But the go-to brand to take you from the football to the ball, and we have that. But we've been moving our product progressively into the sportswear arena, or the casualisation of the office for many years. We've seen suits already become very relaxed, drawstring trousers and things. These kind of things have been selling quite well now for several years, not just because of COVID, but prior to that. It was about the comfort when people were traveling a lot. That was one of the things that we were really focused on. So the combination of sportswear and tailoring is kind of how we wear clothes now. So it was really about keeping that sort of tailored part going strong and really expanding into the rest. Athleisure is really performing well, as you can imagine in the past few years. Everything from tracksuit pants to hoodies to golf activewear. This is a really strong area of the business. And as I said, women's wear also has moved into a sort of a semi-casual state, but interesting to see that shift back into that relaxed suiting. We're now going for genderless suits, which are coming. And we've seen a huge reaction to that from our wholesale customers and our retail buyers. So, we'll start to see this very sort of unisex dressing become more and more part of what we do. So, we shift with the times. We've got to be quick and get the new customers in the door. And the campaign is just beyond anything that we could have imagined. I think like 6 billion impressions in the first week. So, it's just totally, we've never seen so many sort of, young people across different generations and cultures, coming in, wanting a part of that. Buying into that in the stores is something that used to start in a licensed product, which is like fragrance or underwear, but now it's starting to come in and buy directly from the stores. So it's good to see.
Yeah, that's great. The genderless suit I think is really interesting, and definitely in terms of understanding and changing with culture and listening to culture, I think that's really important that Hugo Boss is doing that.
Well, fashion has always been really interesting for me. At the time I went into RMIT University, I also got into architecture and into interior design and journalism, and I didn't know. So I like to write, I like design, I like houses. So it was interesting. I chose that. My dad was an architect, and so that's always really stuck with me. I absolutely love houses, furniture, homeware design. I just bought a new house, and so I'm really keen to renovate that. So that's really inspiring to me, that world. I'm interiors. I really love art. Collect art. I'm not bad. I was just saying before, I'd like to learn a little bit more in terms of oil and acrylic, but I'm not so bad with the old charcoal and gouache and things. But this is something that really helped me in lockdown to get back into, and I actually need to really pick up the brushes again, because having those sort of external passions and joys really helps you perform in your job. And so saying before, there were times there where, it wasn't just me. I'm sure everybody went through it and was like, oh my God, I can't do another day of this. So trying to sort of put variety into your life is important. I love to travel. That hasn't happened for a long time. I love languages. I love to read. I like, again, reading, something that I used to do voraciously, but I need to pick up books again. And books are it's very special to me. I love to eat, learn how to cook a little bit more. So there's lots of things that I'm inspired by, and of course, the world of fashion is ever changing and ever evolving. In terms of mentors, I mentioned my dad, and I'd have to say that my parents, my father, he died actually at my age. Mm-hmm. So I was sort of like always hanging over me. Am I going to get through that? So he was a really, really good inspiration. He was also a basketballer and a basketball coach, and I think his sense of fairness and balance is something that I definitely learned from. Mm-hmm. And I thought, and it was just like, you don't have to be, excuse my language, you don't have to be an arsehole to be in management, and you can treat people with dignity and respect. You can certainly get your message across, but it doesn't mean that you're screaming and ranting and raving. And unfairness and unbalance is something that always is a key issue for me. So I think I learned a lot there. I do have a mentor that I've started to see in probably the last 18 months, and she's been really, really helpful for me because I am so far away from my direct, my bosses in Germany. Haven't been able to travel, and she's been really great at coaching me through, leading in difficult times. The clarity of communication and sometimes the repetition is really, really important, that you just keep banging on with a couple of simple messages. We see that with politicians sometimes, but keep it simple, keep it focused, and be there for your team. And I think authenticity is also really important. Being human, I think being human is really, really an important trait for not just for good leadership. I mean, for anyone, to be yourself. And I think my team has been, amazing. There are times when I think all of us together have been a bit like, can we do this? But I think also the leader, by sometimes saying, actually, it's not easy for me either, and I need you guys to also, step it up. I can't be there, pushing and pulling and motivating you. I actually need other people to sort of come to the party too. But I have a fantastic team, and I think just back on the mentorship, that being authentic, having integrity is and balance are probably the things that drive me. My mentor told me to have a mantra or a purpose. What's your purpose? And each person has, I think, a different purpose. It might be their family. Some people have like making money. But I came up with that to be to be an inspiring leader that acts with integrity.
So I think there's something that I'm picking up on here is that empathy is also a really important part of leadership, of understanding not only you understanding the people who are in your team, but your team also understanding you. And I think that's something which has really come out of the last couple of years, as we keep saying, is that our ability to express our struggles has been a really important thing. Talking about the mantra, I think that's really important. I think a lot of us struggle with issues like anxiety. Depression's enormous at the moment, and that ability to be able to deal with anxiety, even by having something that you repeat to yourself, just going, mine is always like, okay, take a deep breath, it's going to pass.
And
don't say something which is really going to upset someone because you're upset with yourself at the moment. And that's been really useful. Normally it means I'm going to go for a walk. I'll be back in 5 minutes.
Deep breath. Yeah.
But there's something which my friend mentioned to me that you've had a lot to do with Beyond Blue. That Hugo Boss has had a project with Beyond Blue. Can you tell us a bit about that? Because I think that's a really important thing that you guys are working on.
Yeah, well, we've been sort of throwing around that idea for a while, and I just thought, like the beginning of last year, after everything we'd been through in the first year of COVID, we see again, the rise of depression, of anxiety, of different issues, particularly it's focused on men, and I really wanted to do something in that space, and so what we did is we created a little collection, and proceeds from that goes to Beyond Blue, and it's really important that our team is aware of that. That as a modern day corporation, we also about giving back. We've done lots of different kind of charitable or philanthropic things in the past, but this was something that was very visible within the store. And Beyond Blue is an absolutely fantastic organisation. One of my best friends is a psychologist, and he runs like a whole lot of youth mental health clinics. And I was talking to him about heart disease, and another really good friend, he's suffered from really terrible depression in the past few years, and I think seeing that really sort of brought it home. And personally, someone who'd sort of never really kind of had that that happened to me. I mean, last year there was all kinds of times with insomnia. I was feeling anxious, and I never sort of had that before. And I just thought, oh my God, what is this like to live with this heightened anxiety and depression, which is sort of a feeling of nothingness. People think it's a negative feeling, or it's a positive. It was explained to me as a nothingness. It's just something that was really brought home more to me, because I actually, this was after we did Beyond Blue, but I experienced it myself, and I just thought, how many more people are going through this? And as you said, it's now become something that can be discussed. Men are not really great communicators at the best of times, but I think people are feeling much safer discussing it and having those conversations that they don't feel quite right, and they don't really know why, and that is probably just gone unchallenged for so many years. And if we don't talk about it, unfortunately, it can relate that can become something much more serious.
Yeah.
So that's what we're trying to do, and Beyond Blue is an organisation that is fundamentally about discussing the problem, getting the awareness out there, and getting people to open up and talk. So that's my journey too. So that's not always easy to talk about. So I said before, it's not like people don't always think that they're leaders. But my mentor, actually, this is an interesting comment. She works with about 15, 16 different CEOs, and last year she said about 14 of them were going through similar things.
Yeah.
So, I was like, oh, it's not just me. It's not just me, but the ability to sort of talk about things and there is a lot more opportunities, more information on where to go. We've got that always around our building. We have employee assistance programs. We've got numbers to talk to. So Beyond Blue, very proud to be involved, and hopefully we can do more with them this year.
Oh, I think that's wonderful. Everything that you just said, I think probably rings true for most of us now, and the opening up the conversation and allowing people to be able to express that openly in what in the past would have been a tough situation, be able to do that and not feel like you are not being seen as vulnerable is a very liberating thing, not just for men but also for women, for anyone really. I like it. Look, out where I live kind of like on the fringe of Melbourne and the bush, right on the edge of sort of
semi-rural.
Semi-rural, and I love seeing that. A big four-wheel drive with the massive tyres and the twin blowers out the top and all that will go past, and then on the back it'll have a sticker saying it's all right not to be all right. I just think for that cultural shift, for where in the past it was like toughen up,
don't cry.
I think that
stop being a pussy.
I think that it's really important, and especially at the higher level of organisation, it's a really great thing that's taking place. All right, let's talk a little bit more about Hugo Boss. Some really exciting things. Like I've seen that you guys are using some pretty interesting ambassadors recently, globally.
Yes.
In Australia, you guys are doing some great things, but you guys are really tapping into some icons at the moment. Can you tell us about a few of those that globally Hugo Boss have been working with?
Well, yeah. I mean, I think we've had a change of management. We're all very much, I suppose, in existing management. We needed to invest more in our brand building, and so as in business, you have to invest money to make money, and boosting the brand has been one of the key pillars of we call it our Claim 5. So we've gone out and I think that the team in Germany particularly worked with a number of different agencies, worked with people across different fields, different backgrounds, different cultures, to come up with the group that we have now. I mean, we were working with Chris Hemsworth, still remains an ambassador, but we sort of talk about this as the my CEO calls it the oh shit moment. It's sort of it's like it's sort of everywhere. So we've got Carby Lame, who's huge TikTok star. We've got the likes of Kendall Jenner and Hailey Bieber, who people may not necessarily have associated with our women's wear, but are icons in their own right. For my market, I pushed very strongly for Lee Min Ho, who's an incredibly well-known Korean actor and has quite a lot of cut through, particularly across the Asia Pacific region. We've got Anthony Joshua, the boxer, Matteo Berrettini, who was just here for the Australian Open. We've got his collection in store too, by the way, so go and check it out. Great person to work with. The rapper Future. So it's really quite a diverse collection of people.
Yeah, and Iris Apfel also.
Iris Apfel, yeah. So that was also part of pushing out the new brand, the simplified logo. We've done that with a number of influencers globally. Each market has probably picked, a few, and that's extension again of the brand reach. So it's like 6 billion impressions. I think we were up to. It's not bad. We just we can't get enough of that hoodie right now.
Yeah.
We've got new people in the store we've never seen before, so that's awesome.
That's great. I mean, when we walked in and I was looking at some of your screens, I saw like the skateboard. I think the skateboards popped up on one of the screen with Boss on it, and I was like, yeah, that's cool. I'm sorry, as a young skater, I just think anything to do with skateboarding is always gonna resonate. But I think that's really interesting and definitely a really great step in a really interesting direction for the brand. So what I guess maybe we've talked about a lot of really interesting things today. What's next, do you think, for you? What do you want to do with Boss and maybe in the future?
Well, I think it's a really interesting time to be with the brand. A lot of the things that I think a lot of us in terms of leaders have wanted to do for a long time are now coming into reality. So it's about sort of harnessing now that new momentum and getting out there and really focusing on a true omni-channel environment. So, retail, department stores, wholesale, has a lot more opportunity in this market and in my other markets. And then e-com, eventually I hope we can sort of run our e-com more from a local level, and we're working on that now. Currently it's more of a global situation. So there's a lot to do, so I look after the markets of, Japan, where, there's, a lot, and Korea, where there's a lot more potential for the market. We haven't invested very heavily in those markets in the past, but we've really seen good momentum in the past few years. Southeast Asia, COVID sort of knocked Southeast Asia around a little bit, but we see travel opening up again. And those emerging markets, the rise of the middle class is quite phenomenal. You see a market like Philippines, which they say, Manila will have, 1.5 million families that are considered, middle class by American comparison in the next 3 to 4 years. Currently, it's only 500,000. So that is incredible exponential rise and really good opportunities. And I think that the landscape shifts so quickly. That's also really interesting. We're bringing on, clients or customers like Culture King, who perhaps would never have worked with us in the past, but are incredibly interested in working with us now because of whether it might be our MBA collaborations or some of the ambassador programs that we've been talking about. So it's a new way of looking at things, new customer experience, and we've got huge growth plans for the region, and it's a big challenge, but I'm there to deliver.
Yeah, great. I think we'll finish up there. I think that was a really fascinating conversation, and for students who are sort of in their final years of their courses at the moment with LCI, for them to be able to hear that sort of transition, but from someone who studied fashion, but wasn't so much wanting to do the design side, but really was fascinated in the business side. Business is an art form in its own right.
That's right. When you
go into it from that creative perspective, and you go into it from you can be competitive, and I think probably most people who work in business need to have that level of competitiveness, but also that level of excellence that comes to the work. And I think that's probably what you bring to it. And you can only be excellent if you draw on inspirations from all over the place and you think really carefully and creatively about what you do. And I think you encapsulate that. So I just want to say thank you very much, Matthew.
Well, thank you very much for coming.
Yeah, thanks for talking with us today.
We haven't had many guests into our new offices yet, but hopefully that will be, we'll get more in the future.
Well, thank you very much for having us, and good luck with the rollout for everything that's happening with Hugo Boss, and good luck with the future developments within your career.
Yeah, thanks very much.
Yeah, great.